Gatan, the street of Birger Jarl. And Birger Jarl was the founder of Stockholm in 1252. But today, this street is a more high-fashionable street. We have brands as the Gucci's, the Pradas, the Chanel's, the Mulberry, the Burberry, the Blueberry, the Strawberry, the Raspberry, the Blackberry, all kinds of berries you can find here. Now, as you can see, I know nothing about that kind of fashion, but what I do know is that we are now setting course towards the nightclub mecca of Stockholm, called Stureplan. And you know, I will show you here, and it goes on hour after hour, and if you get tired, you just switch hands. Restaurants and nightclubs of Scandinavia. Here on your right hand side, you have Sturehof, an institution open 365 days per year, and it's been on that location since 1897. And in the 1920s, two guys met in there during a crayfish party. And they decided, probably after a couple of Swedish snaps, that they should every year treat their employees for crayfish in August to celebrate that moment. Now here on your right hand side you have something a bit strange, because that thing is a mushroom made out of concrete. First constructed in 1937. Then due to traffic regulations in 1988 it got torn down and then rebuilt in 1989 to this thing we have today. And even if it's the only one of its kind, it's still the most famous mushroom in the country and probably the most popular meeting point here in Stockholm. Because you can always say to a local, "Vi ses vid svampen, I'll meet you up by the mushroom," and everyone will know exactly where you mean. There's a big, beautiful yellow building, and that is the Royal Library. It was built in the late 1800s, however the latest edition was built in the 1980s, and we actually can't see from outside, since it consists of a 5-story underground room that was created to make space for all the expanding book collections that we have there over at the Royal Library. And in the year 1661, a rule was established here in Sweden that said that every publisher had to send at least one copy of their work to the Royal Library. And this was of course so we could monitor everything that was being published here. So your left hand side is called Humlegården. Directly translated, we would call it Hopsyard. So humle means hops, which is also one of the main ingredients when you make beer. That's correct. And that's exactly what Humlegården was being used for back in the days, to grow our beloved hops, which we use to make our beloved beer. And this the Swedes have been doing here since the 1200s, so we sure love our beer here in Sweden. But now we are driving on to Karlavägen in the area of Östermalm. Öster means east, so that means that we are in the eastern part of the city right now. And up until the late 1800s, this place was actually considered to be Stockholm's slum area, which you can't really believe. Windows are generally larger than in any other place in the city. Vi åker alltså just nu på Karlavägen. Den är döpt efter Karlarna den 10:e, den 11:e och den 12:e. Och är även en av 4 gator i Stockholm som har en vacker träallé i mitten. Now this on your left hand side, that was actually for the rich people back in the days to walk on so they didn't get horse shit on their pretty clothes. And the more poor people, they had to walk on these regular sidewalks. Luckily today anyone can walk, or Tim Berling as his real name was. He actually went to school here on your left hand side in that big brown brick building as a teenager. And that high school is named Östra Real. And over there did also former Prime Minister Carl Bildt go to school. So that place has molded many famous people over the years. Self-proclaimed king. And I'll give you some clues as to who he is. He likes to kick football and he almost always has his hair in a bun. Do you know who it is? Zlatan Ibrahimovic, of course. And you know, he actually lives just a couple of blocks away from here. And some years ago he bought a church for himself, which I think suits him quite well since he literally thinks he's God himself. Now here on your left hand side we have Karlaplan, one of the biggest roundabouts in the city. And you see there's a flea market going on here, and it's usually on by the warmer season here in Stockholm. And by that time is also a big fountain going on in the middle. But we have to turn it off at the beginning of June each year, because by that time it's graduation time here in Sweden, and if we don't turn it off by then, our students will treat it as their own property. With the letters SEB on it is where he used to live for a time. He's been nominated for 9 Oscars, in which he has won 3. But I think he's mostly famous for making the movie Fanny and Alexander from 1983. And that house that he lived in is also known for being called Strindberghuset, the House of Strindberg, named after the famous Swedish author August Strindberg, who also lived in that building for a while. Now, Stockholm ranks in the top when it comes to number of museums. We host about 1 museum of history, and it's mostly famous for having its underground vaults that contain gold and silver objects from 400 AD during the migration period. And with its 100 museums, Stockholm is actually one of the cities in the world with the most museums per square meter. So that's only one of the many we are going to see along this journey. Vi åkte alltså just nu förbi det historiska museet som är känt för sitt guldrum med både guld och silver. And this place is royal ground that has been owned by the Swedish king since the 1400s, and it got its name from the fact that it used to be the king's private hunting area. So Animal Yard was from that fact. But in the 1700s we had a king called Adolf Fredrik, and he was not interested in hunting at all, so we opened up Djurgården for the public. And now, as we turn to the left, I want you to take a ride. And there are some different myths about...
Life will pass me by if I don't open my eyes. So that's fine by me. So wake me up when it's on.
Come on everybody, do the event with me. And some like to do this one, raise the roof, but this is the most popular one. And here on your left hand side in that pink building is actually where Avicii used to live. That's his childhood home. So he had most of his early life in the same area here in Stockholm. Okay guys, now we are soon going to be driving into the diplomatic city of Stockholm. But first we are actually going to be stopping for a while, because here on your right hand side we have the Noble Park, which is the oldest park in Stockholm. And you know, its name is the Noble Park, named after the Stockholm-born dynamite inventor, among many other things, Alfred Nobel, who we actually have here with us today. On your left is in the shape of the smallest statue in Stockholm. So over there by the fence, in the little Swedish scarf and little Swedish hat, is Alfred Nobel. You on the right-hand side can stand up if you want a better look, because it's really worth seeing. See it over there. Water here on your right hand side, where we are soon going to be splashing down in the shape of a shark. But first, let's take a look at these villas. They were built in the early 1900s, and most of them are embassies today, but 2 of them are privately owned, and I'm going to point them out for you when we are on the water. But first, let's take a look at maybe the most beautiful embassy in the whole of the diplomatic city. Coming up after this one, we have the US Embassy. Wow. Well, okay, maybe it's not the most beautiful one. You know, in my opinion, it kind of looks like McDonald's, which means big field in Old Swedish. And this is see the typical Östermalm people power walking here in tights. So I guess you could say that time changes. You know, Titanic is actually Ove's favorite movie. He said that's what inspired him to become a captain. Promising, since we are soon going down in the water. But first I'm going to be a little bit boring with you, because we're going to have a safety briefing first. So please sharpen your ears. I want you to stay. Okay guys, 3, 2, 1, go! Good job, Ove! We're actually riding them. is still here? All of the children are still here? Perfect. Okay guys, if you take a look here on your left hand side, you will see a big beautiful building behind those trees with a glass ceiling, and that is the Nordic Museum, and it was built in 1907. And a funny thing about that building is that not that long ago our beloved Swedish king turned 70 years old, which he celebrated by partying for 3 days straight. Of course, because he's the king, you know? And one of those days he actually spent in there. But why at the Nordic Museum, you may be asking yourselves? Well, you see, if you take a look a little bit over there on your left hand side, you will see a big blue gate. And that is a symbolism of the time where Animal Yard here on your left hand side used to be gated. But luckily it isn't today. But now I will take a moment or two and explain how this thing works. Because how can we sit in a bus and then 1 minute later in a boat? Well, you see, in essence, we are all sitting in a completely normal Volvo lorry that we bought brand new and then shipped to the States, where a very strange man lives named John, who took the lorry framework, dismounted it, took the parts that he needed, and then put it together again into this white thing surrounding us made in aluminum. So I guess you could say that the ocean bus is kind of homemade. And a common question we often get is, what happens with the wheels when we hit the water? Does anyone want to guess? Well, as you said, nothing. You guessed correctly, because nothing happens with the wheels. They don't transform or go up or anything, so not really a James Bond car. But it's kind of a cool vehicle, because over here can actually steer this boat with a joystick that is connected at the rudder at the end of the bus. And back there we also have a big propeller that is pushing us forward right now. So when we get back on safe dry land, you can all go around and have a look at both of them, because they are quite spectacular. Now, I said earlier that Stockholm houses about 100 different museums, and many of them you can actually find here at Animal Yard, Djurgården, on your left hand side. Such as the Nordic Museum we just passed, the Vasa Museum, the ABBA Museum, the Viking Museum, and even Ove's favorite museum, which is the Museum of Alcohol. And over at Djurgården you can also find the world's first open-air museum, and it's called Skansen. And over at Skansen you can meet animals and look at old Swedish houses, and the employees are actually dressed in old Swedish folklore clothes and dancing and singing all day long. I really recommend going to Skansen because it's a blast. And the funny thing about Skansen, I mean maybe more straight ahead, that red tower is standing on the second smallest island of Stockholm called Castellholmen. And on the top of that red tower is a Swedish flag, and it's actually Sweden's peace flag because it symbolizes